10:30 a.m. for Legally Yours with John Fuller, right here on WOCA 1370 a.m. and 96.3 FM, The Source. When it really counts, depend on The Source for the latest weather updates, keeping you ahead of the storm. 96.3 FM, 1370 a.m., The Source.
All right, 12 minutes before 10 o'clock. Let's return to our conversation with Dave Woverton. He's on the phone, and he is a very prolific writer. We're talking about the connection between science fiction, science fantasy, and the future, the realities of the future. One of the books that was mentioned on the article that I brought up to talk about this was the 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. And in the book, in the movie. And I did read the book, but it's been so long I don't remember if he specifically talked about something that sounded like iPads. But iPads are definitely in the movie. It is cool. They're sitting eating breakfast, and right in front of them is an iPad or a pad, and they're basically getting the news, online newspapers, and all that. It is kind of cool to see that kind of stuff. And so Dave Woverton, by the way, is also known as David Farland, and it says in my notes here that writing as David Farland is a New York Times bestselling fantasy author, and under his own name, Dave Woverton, he is a New York Times bestselling science fiction author with more than 50 novels in print. And between the two names, numerous awards, and he's one of the judges in the L. Ron Hubbard Writers of the Future Anthology Awards. Dave, thank you for waiting during the break. Can I ask you about being a judge? Am I right that by the fact that it doesn't cost a writer to enter this, that you guys are, I mean, you must have hundreds, thousands of people submitting their work. Am I right?
Yes. I get thousands every quarter. The contest runs every 3 months, and we get entries from all over the world. I think from something like 138 countries so far, and of course, we don't get them all at once, but I'm the first reader, so I get to go through all of them, and I look at the openings, I look to see if the ideas are fresh, if the writing is crisp and good, and then go through and submit them to the other judges. So I get to see it all, the good, bad, and the ugly.
Oh, man. And so that means you're a speed reader, or no?
Actually, I am a speed reader, but I don't like to do that when I'm reading fiction, because so much of reading fiction depends upon voice and tone, and making sure that you get the cadences right.
Oh, wow.
When the writers submit to this particular contest, and if they do succeed in winning the contest, are they guaranteed a publishing contract, or do they just use this as something that they have participated in and use it as part of their resume to go to places like Simon & Schuster and things like that to get their works published?
They do get a publishing contract. We publish each of the short stories that's in the winners, and we just published Writers of the Future Volume 30, which is a big a large format paper book, and we also, with it, we publish the winners of the Illustrators of the Future, who go through and illustrate each of the stories. So we've got beautiful full color illustrations in the books and things like that. So there's prize money for winning, and then there's money being paid for publishing, and then on top of that, you get your credibility. You get the ability to go to other publishers. When I won many years ago, 27 years ago, I went to the top of the World Trade Center, and we had our awards ceremony, and I was approached by 8 different publishers, and I got my first novel contract, a 3-book contract, within about a week.
Wow.
Oh, that's exciting. Wow, and you were on the observation deck?
Yep, we were up on the top of World Trade Center, number 2, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 2. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, when I was much younger, I wanted to write songs. And so I wondered, well, how do you write a song? And at that time, there was no Google. I went to the public library. This was in the 60s, just to give you an idea. And I couldn't find one book on how to write a song. Now, if you go to the bookstore or the library, there's a gazillion of them. And the problem I have with the How to Write Songs books is that it basically tells you how to write songs the way they've already been written. They don't. It's almost better, I think, in retrospect, looking back at this, that there maybe shouldn't be a book, because it'll prevent anybody from having a new idea on how to do this. Mm-hmm. Does the same thing happen with books? I'm guessing even some of the classic authors, I'm sure they had no classes on how to write a book. They just did it. They just did it, right?
Yeah, before about before 1930, there were no writing classes taught at any university in the world. And by about 1960s, they started teaching some writing classes. And as you say, there's a proliferation of books on how to write, and workshops on how to write, and classes, and all of that kind of thing. And heck, I teach some myself. But yeah, there's an awful lot out there. I think, though, that that education helps you avoid making some of the mistakes, but it also trains you to think in certain ways and closes you off to possibilities too.
Yeah, I guess I guess you have to approach it from a creative mind point of view. Like, if you know as a student that you're learning the basics, but keep your mind open to the idea of doing something. I hate the phrase outside the box only because everybody uses it, but that thinking differently or trying to be innovative in some way.
Yeah, I hate the phrase outside the box. We need to come up with a phrase that's outside the box.
Right.
How do you?
But you learn the rules, but then you have to learn how to break them, and when to break them, because every rule is really just a guideline, and you look at something like the poetry of E.E. Cummings, who didn't use punctuation or capitalization in his things and just used spacing to give you a sense of when to pause and how long to pause and things like that. And it was absolutely beautiful. And there's all sorts of things like that could be done. But by golly, if you wrote a story without any pacing or punctuation in it and sent it to me at Writers of the Future, I'm not sure that I would recognize immediately what you were doing.
Do the readerships of the science fiction have different identifiers as they do in music? For example, if I were to guess who's listening to music produced now, I guess it's probably a younger group, more likely. Is that true for books, or do you find like science fiction especially? Do you find that the readership goes anywhere from 15 to 100 or whatever?
Oh yeah. I mean, you think about it. Children, in particular, love wonder literature, and so science fiction and fantasy. They're always watching cartoons. They're always listening to fables and fairy tales. They're much more open to it than adults are, and so our readership, starts. Gosh, if I go to a school and I talk to kids. I'll find first graders who are reading Lord of the Rings and things like this.
Oh wow, first graders!
As your role as a mentor, how do you keep your objectivity, yet allow the creativity from others to come forward without taking some of your creative ideas and telling the other authors what they should write about, what they should do, without sacrificing that creativity for your own stories?
Well, what I do is I work with the author. Most of the authors who come to me almost always have ideas for their novels, for example. But sometimes they have, they want to write small novels that don't have a very large audience. And so, for example, I had one author who came to me a few years ago and said, how do I write the best-selling young adult novel of all time? And so I sat down and talked to her. I said, well, it's going to be about a girl. She'll be about 16 years old. It's going to be a romance with a strong sense of wonder. And the author of that was Stephanie Meyer, who wrote Twilight. And we basically sat down, and she talked about ideas that she had about setting it in Forks, Washington, and things. And basically, she kind of came up with the main ideas for the whole story all by herself. But when we got done, she just said, wow, that's such a weird novel. I've never thought about writing anything like that before. And, she had to go think about it for about a year before she finally had the dream that led her to say, okay, I'm ready to write this book.
And now it's a movie, 3 movies from her. Yeah.
So do you, when you're writing under the pen name, do you take on it? Does that affect you somewhat? Is there a psychological thing that happens for you because you're writing under a different name?
No, that's really just a marketing thing. Dave Woverton, the science fiction writer, always got his books put on the bottom shelf. And when I started writing fantasy, I said, okay, I want to be in the middle of the shelves somewhere. So David Farland gets his books fairly.
You could have named David Aaron, or Alan Aaron, or something. The contest that kind of focus, I guess, one of the focal points of this conversation. We've had two authors who've won. One of them lives here.
Yes.
In our community, and it's just such a joy to speak to you guys. I mean, also humble. I mean, it's like talking to movie stars who don't have an ego. That's what talking to an author is for the most part. So the book that these writings are in is called. Is it the L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future, Volume 30? Is that the full name?
That's correct.
Okay, and is it out yet? It's out, right?
Oh yeah, it's definitely out. Yep.
And is it everywhere? It's like in the bookstore. Is it a big book?
It's a big book. It's in all the bookstores. If you go down to Barnes and Noble or I'm not sure, Books A Million or Crown or Walmart actually even has it right now. So any place where books are sold, pretty much. As I like to say, at finer gas stations everywhere.
I love that.
As writers, we don't get to have a whole lot of pride. They beat it out of us pretty early. So.
I often think it would have been fascinating to speak to L. Ron Hubbard. I guess that chance won't happen unless science fiction, bringing back the dead, actually comes to pass.
That's right.
Dave, thank you for being on the air with us today. Fascinating conversation. And come back anytime.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Great interview. All right, we'll take a little break, and we will be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. It had a lot to do with the financial crisis, the sale of risky subprime mortgages that burned investors. Now one big bank will pay for it, Citigroup agreeing to a $7 billion settlement.